All right, welcome everybody. I'm very excited to be talking to Grace Savard, a 22 grad, right, Grace?
Yeah, yep.
Yep, from St. Ben's, and just started her master's in public health at the U of Minnesota in public health administration and health policy. And Grace did such a wonderful job applying for and looking at different programs and getting scholarships that I thought it'd be really great for you all to um, be able to kind of have a conversation with Grace virtually here and find out what her tips and tricks are for applying to public health school. So, Grace, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your interests and what led you to public health?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Grace. I use she, her pronouns. So my path to public health was pretty curvy. It wasn't necessarily a straight line. While I was in school, I thought I was going to be a PA, physician assistant, and was thinking about doing direct patient care and going to graduate school for that. I worked as a CNA while I was in college, and CNA is certified nursing assistant in long-term care and hospice, and loved that job. And it kind of made me think about healthcare from a different point of view. I was thinking a lot more about systems and about research and policy, and realized that pursuing a career in public health would allow me to explore some of those interests a little more. So that's sort of where I landed. I'm now pursuing public health with a general focus in healthy aging and innovation, and thinking about older adults.
Great. And so just thinking back to when you were a student and in the year since you graduated, if you can tell us a little bit about what did you do to prepare for entering public health, both while you were in college and since you graduated?
Yeah. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I didn't really know public health was going to be my career for I didn't know for sure until my senior year, but before then I had a little inkling that I maybe wanted to do some public health. While I was at school, I was in ETL, extending the link. Love ETL. I also was in choir. I was in Global Health Affairs Club. I did some tutoring. I was involved with research at school. Trying to think of things. I did some internships in the summer with nonprofits in the Twin Cities. And basically what I did is when I was applying to public health school and thinking about doing public health, I really wanted to sort of make sure that how I was writing about these things on my resume and my personal statement, I wrote about those things and took out the skills that I felt like would be applicable to public health. So for my research, that's pretty self-explanatory. I talked about learning how to code and transcribe and interview, and then was able to apply that towards why I wanted to do public health. Working as a CNA, I talked about that at my resume, and again, was able to say how my experience working in healthcare, direct patient care had motivated me to think about public health systems as a whole. So I think the key thing is like, do what you love in college, find some things that you can be involved with long term. If you can, try and be engaged in leadership positions. You want to show that you're committed to things, and those things might not necessarily say public health as a part of their title, but if you can find a way to show that you're committed and find a way to show that you've developed skills that will help you be a successful public health professional, I think that that's what they're looking for in terms of what you did during college.
Great. And I know you looked into a lot of programs. Did you find most of them had prerequisites for different areas of public health?
Great question. So prereqs for public health are different from other pre-professional programs. Like I said before, I was pre-PA, and for pre-physician assistant, you have this whole list of things you have to do, whole list of classes you have to take. Public health is a little different in that for me, for my particular program, there weren't any prerequisites for particular coursework. However, Ellen and I were just talking about this in general. Some, like looking broadly, most programs will look for a human biology course of some sort, a statistics course or a research methods course, and then some sort of general college math course. However, what I would advise is, because there is so much variance between different public health schools and those programs at those public health schools, I would make a spreadsheet. So that's what I did. I had a spreadsheet of the schools I was interested in, and I listed out the prereqs for each of those schools and the programs that I was interested in. I did that really early on. So thinking like if you are a first year or a sophomore and you know you're interested in public health, start making the spreadsheet, start pulling out some schools you might be interested in, look at their prereqs, write them down, and then you can use that to sort of tailor your course plan at St. Ben St. John's. One thing I would say is that some of the more hard science public health programs like epidemiology, biostats, they will look for more quantitative skills and analytical skills, whether that's in your coursework or internships. Again, I would say refer to the school website for the particular about that. Ellen and I were also just talking about making sort of a standardized spreadsheet that can act as a template for you all, that has the columns to look for and things to look for. And then you basically just input the school's particular data, and then you can have a really nice organized way of comparing those schools to one another. Do you have anything to add on that?
No, that's great. And we'll make that spreadsheet available.
We'll work on that.
Yeah. So like you mentioned about, pre-PA school or pre-med, there's this very specific list of things that you need to do to get into it. And then once you get there, you don't have to decide what kind of medicine you want to practice if you're going into pre-med. But for public health, you kind of have to make a decision before you apply, because there's all these different, you could be in public health education or epidemiologist or biostatistics, or I don't even know all the possibilities. So I guess how would someone decide which area of that of public health they're interested in? And then how would you kind of prepare for all those different subfields, or for one of them if you aren't quite sure? Like, say you are a first or second year student watching this video and you're like, I don't know, I just like public health, but I'm not really sure what the options are. And like, where would you start?
Yeah. So, oh my goodness, there's a lot of ways to answer this. I think the first thing would be to familiarize yourself with what the different programs look like. And so, what I would maybe do is Google some schools, Google like University of Minnesota, or that's a great example, and look at their programs, and they will give a description, and think about if any of that is interesting to you. One thing too to note is that networking is, I think, the way to figure out what kind of public health career you might want to pursue. If you might be interested in epidemiology, connect with an epidemiologist. If maybe community health promotion is something you're interested in, think about connecting with someone who might be working at the county in community health work. We have some alumni that are working in all of these spaces. And so I would say connect with Ellen or connect with me. And we can certainly connect you with people who might be able to tell you more about their particular career. The last thing that I would say is just starting the program, I've had several conversations with other students, and what I can say confidently is that even though you're in a master's program and a particular program, most people don't know exactly what they want to do yet. And so the master's program is designed, you have your core coursework that everybody in every program has to take, similar to like the common curriculum. I don't know, is that what it's called?
Integrations. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. At St. Ben St. John's, where you have these sort of interdisciplinary courses to take. Those courses are designed to help you think about, what coursework do I want to do? What career do I want to take? The same thing happens in most public health schools. So like for me, I did have to know enough applying that I wanted to do public health administration policy. But within that, I have my core classes where I'll take an epidemiology course and I'll take a biostats course. I also have electives that I can take however I want. So if I figure out later on in the program that I have a strong interest in biostats, which probably won't be the case, but maybe it will be, I have room to then take those biostats classes as electives. I would say talk to people, but also know that choosing a program does not necessarily mean that you're going to do that for the rest of your life. One last thing on that is if you really are unsure and you're not sure what program is best, choose a program that offers flexibility in terms of the careers of people that are leaving that program pursue. So like for me, I chose the PHAP program, Public Health Administration and Policy, because people that are leaving that program work in research and government and community health and policy. So there's a lot of flexibility. leaving an epidemiology program, you might be a little bit more limited in that scope. Not that that's wrong or anything, it's great, but it's just knowing about the flexibility of the program, I think, is important when you are choosing which one's best for you.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So there's lots of public health schools in, in North America and the US. And so if you're a student who's decided you want to go into public health, how do you kind of figure out what factors should you be looking at to decide where to apply, where you might want to go? How did you narrow down your list? Like, what did you think about?
Yeah. So I'll tell you all what I thought about, but know that this is different for everyone. So my number one sort of word of advice would be to figure out the things that are most important to you, stick to them, and then use that to compare your schools to one another. So for me, some of those factors were one, a focus on aging. I knew that I wanted to work with older adults. And so I wanted to make sure that I was going to a school that prioritized aging. The way that I did this was I looked at the research centers of each particular school. I also looked at particular professors that were doing work to see if it was something I was interested in. So that was a way that I was used to gauge, is this school focusing on aging? Is it not? I also read every school's mission and vision statement, or something of the sorts. They all kind of call it different things. But that helped me to get a sense of what the general vibes were for the school, what their overall school commitments were for. I was really looking for a school that had a focus on justice work, and the vision and mission statements tend to speak a little bit to that. Cost of living, so fun, and also something that's really important to cover. I think one thing to note is that, like, the sticker price of the school is not necessarily how expensive or how inexpensive it's going to be to live there. You have to think about the cost of tuition, but also the fees, and also, how much is it going to cost to have an apartment? Are you going to have a car? So I thought a lot about what does cost of living entail, and how can I make sure that I'm comparing the right factors and all of the factors I need to think about the schools that's going to make the most sense for me. I looked at scholarships. I looked at general location. Maybe you want to be in the Midwest. Maybe you really want to get out of the Midwest and want to be in the East Coast or the West Coast. The last thing that I looked at was the general rank of the school. This was important to me because I wanted to pursue research, and I wanted to be at a school that had a large funding base for supporting research. I also maybe am thinking of pursuing more school down the line. And so I wanted to make sure that I was at a institution that was supporting public health, both at the master's level and levels beyond that. But I don't think the rank is important for everyone. So again, it's important to think about the factors that are important to you, and then categorize and compare schools based off of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you want a research career or you want a PhD, then the rank is something that you'd really want to consider, because you want to get into the best funded PhD program. But if you know the MpH is that the terminal degree that you want, then depending on what kind of job you want, then the rank of the school may not be important at all. So I think that would be, you want to go to a reputable school, but not like Phoenix University or whatever, but Phoenix being the online one, not the city. I don't know if they have. But, yeah. So the next,
just one more thing.
Yeah.
So I was only looking at in-person MPH programs, Master's of Public Health programs, but there are several programs that are online that will allow you to work full-time or work part-time and do school online, full-time or part-time. So if that's something that's of interest to you, I would just want to make that known, that there are options to do online MPHs from very reputable and credible schools. And oftentimes it sometimes is a more affordable way to do it, because you can work at the same time. Granted, there are cons. You're not in person building those connections in person, but it is something to think about when you're thinking about which program is best for you.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the application. I know there's multiple components to it, but if you could kind of walk us through each component of the application and any tips you have for students on those, that'd be great.
Yeah. So most schools will use an application portal. It's called SOPHAS, SOPHAS. And for most schools, you put all of your information on there and then it gets submitted to the school from there. But there are some kind of pretty big components that are within that SOPHAS application. The first is just general personal information. So it's going to ask you for, your general personal information, like if you were applying for a job. The big thing that I think gets the most focus and the most attention is your personal statement. So this is basically like your statement of purpose for why you want to pursue public health school. The way that I thought about it is like, this is my moment to sort of share about my story of how I came to public health and what I want to do with this degree in the future. Your personal statement is separate for each school. So what I did is I wrote one for one school, and then I basically tailored the last paragraph to be school specific. Granted, sometimes you want to look at all the schools you're applying to and figure out what their length requirements are, because sometimes they're different. Columbia, for example, if that's a school that you're considering at this time, they're like length requirement is 500 words and the other schools are 1,500 words. So for that, like, you have to really shift things a lot if they are a school that you're considering. But I would say, yes, personal statement. You do submit an individual one to each school. So you want to make sure that you are writing the correct school in there, that you're writing the correct school's information in that personal statement. But the bare bones of that are going to be similar. Or for me, at least, they were similar for the schools that I applied to. Along with the personal statement, you'll also have some supplemental questions that are dependent on the school. I would say most schools had some sort of question related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work, asking about your personal experience with that, how you see your role as a public health professional intersecting with that. The way that you want to strategize it is you don't want to say the exact same thing in your personal statement that you did in your supplemental questions. So what I tried to do right off the bat is think about, what is the prompt for the personal statement? What is the prompt for the supplemental questions? How can I make sure that I am strategizing where I write what? The next part is letters of rec. Letters of rec, I think it's 3. Yes, 3 that you submit. Again, like, you want to check with the schools specifically about this because there's some variance in that. Yeah, your letters of rec are going to basically speak to you and your potential for a public health program. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about tips for that a little bit later, but that is a big component of the application. The last one is, or not the last one, but there's a transcript. So you're going to submit your transcript. You submit it from like the National Student Clearinghouse, but you also have to manually input your transcript. Again, I'll share a little more tips about that in a bit, but that's that 4th component. And then the last component is your resume. And along with that, a manual input of your resume. So you're submitting the physical resume and also putting in all of the specific things that you did. I don't know why they have you do that, but it's important to note because it does take a lot of time. Yeah. So those are the big components. Again, I'll speak more on particular tips of those different things, but anything that I missed?
No, I think, yeah. So maybe we can just dive into like the personal statement. That's always a really stressful one for people. Like, what should they write about? What process did you have and who did you have read it? Give us all your insider tips for a good personal statement.
Yes. So the personal statement, I spent a lot of time on it. I think the best tip that I would say is to get started early and know that you can restart and reshape it and delete it. And I did that many times at the beginning, just trying to figure out how to frame my thoughts. I think it's really important to have an outline so that, because you're working with a length requirement, you want to make sure that you are thinking about how much time and how much space on the page you have to dedicate to the different components of your life that you're trying to highlight. The way that I structured mine, which is not necessarily the right way to do it, but it is the way that I found easiest for me, was I started with kind of a general story, pulling people in to why I wanted to pursue public health. For mine, I actually talked about working with one of the monks at St. Ben St. John's who made a really big impact in me. And I worked with him in the long-term care facility there, and then kind of talked about how that relationship motivated me to pursue public health as a whole. So I basically like use that first paragraph to bring people in, to show them a little bit about who you are. And then kind of, I guess I framed it as like a thesis statement for this is why I want to do public health. The next part that I focused on was thinking a little bit more about my like school background, what I majored in, what I did during college. You don't want to just regurgitate what you said on your resume, but you do want to highlight some of the things that you did during school and how that, shaped you into who you are. For St. Ben St. John's, I think it's important to highlight you went to a liberal arts school and that you got a well-rounded education in that regard. I talked about study abroad. So if study abroad is something you did, highlighting that a little bit. Also, I included that on my resume, which is something that a lot of people forget to put on their resumes. Let's see. And then after that, I broke it down into my personal work experience and how that shaped, kind of helped me understand public health in a new way. So I had a research section where I talked about how research informed my views in public health. And then I had a community partnership angle. And I closed with this paragraph about basically why University of Minnesota, why Washington University, why these different schools. And that was where I, tried to tie in their mission and vision statement into my personal mission and vision. That was where I, sort of ended by saying, if I go here, I'd like to work at this research center. I'd like to work with this professor. You want to show that you've done some research on the school in that last paragraph. You want to show that you're enthusiastic and excited. And again, that last paragraph is where you say, this is why I want to go to WashU, or this is why I want to go to the University of Minnesota. Yeah. Did I miss anything there?
No, that's super helpful. I agree with that too.
For reading, like have tons of people read it. I think that's really important. Know that you don't have to take everybody's feedback. That's also really important because the more people you share it with, the more feedback you're going to get, and it'll be overwhelming and people will share conflicting, opinions. What I did is I shared Word copies of my document with people. And then when they sent it back, they usually said like Ellen read mine, and she would send it back with Ellen comments on the back of it. So then I could see, okay, this is the draft that Ellen sent me back. It kind of helps you to keep things a little bit organized. So you have your fresh, clean copy, and then you can make those edits as appropriate as you feel work best for your writing. But ask people to read it early. Like ask people, don't be afraid to like throw sections away and completely start over. Again, the beauty with starting early is that you have that flexibility.
Yeah. And then in terms of the supplemental questions, you talked about making sure that you're kind of mapping it out in advance to make sure you're not repeating things, but what kinds of what did you use that section to convey? What were you trying to get across there?
So that I'm trying to think because it was a little bit different for each school.
Yeah.
A lot of times there was a question about DEIJ work. And so I maybe would, I talked a lot about how I worked with two different nonprofits that were Latino led in the Twin Cities, and how like working alongside those organizations helped me to really kind of dive deeper into what it looks like to walk alongside people in DEI work. And so I would say like, if I talked about that in the supplemental questions, then I would maybe take it out a little bit or talk about it in a different way. A lot of times the supplemental questions are going to be very specific to the university. So they'll say like, why University of Washington? They'll say more than that, but something like that. And then in that case, it was really hard because I had to figure out my last paragraph of my personal statement had to be different from the supplemental question. I would say those are opportunities, the supplemental questions, to show that you've done your research and to show that you're highlighting really particular things. You're not trying to share a million things in those supplemental questions. You're trying to further elaborate on something that maybe you didn't give a lot of time to in your personal statement.
Or maybe it's something that you are really proud of, but it didn't really fit into your personal statement.
Yeah.
You kind of that opportunity. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I have to move to the charger really quickly. I'm gonna try.
Okay, no problem. Zoom. All right, we're back from charging our computers. Okay. So the next question I wanted to ask you was about the letters of recommendation, a little bit more about that. So who do you ask? Like how in advance do you ask them? What tips do you have about letters of rec and what makes good letters of rec for public health?
Yeah. So in terms of who to ask, I think ultimately you want to ask people that know you well, and that will be able to highlight different parts of your character, different parts of your academic experience. In terms of the people, like I always ask the question at these when I was applying for, should I do work supervisors? Should I do professors? Should I do, I didn't really know. And Columbia actually like laid it out really nicely. They basically said, if you're within 5 years of your undergrad, they typically want at least 2 references. So 2 out of your references to be from school. So thinking about professors. If you are further out, if you've been working for 5 years, 5 or more years after your undergrad, then they would want like a work boss, but still some academic references. All 3 of my recommendations were professors, and I think that ultimately worked the best for me. Again, because I really wanted to choose people who could speak to me and speak to my experiences. In terms of
jump in for 1 second here, Grace. So Grace worked as a public health navigator for a health system, right? That's pretty much your role for the last year. But when she was submitting her application material, she'd only been there. She was just starting that job. So if she had worked there 2 years, maybe someone from that workplace would have been appropriate to show both your work side and your academic side. But if you're like Grace and you're in your 1 gap year or even your second one, and you think the people still who know you best is the academic, your professors, then it's okay to go with those, right? But I bet if you're more like 4 years in the workplace and your work was relevant to public health, then you probably want at least one of them to be from there, because otherwise they might be like, I see you worked at this like health place for 2 years and yet you don't have a single person who could write you a letter. What's up with that? So I think you want to kind of strategize based on your particular situation, right. But ultimately the people who can write you the best letters.
Right. Right. And they do lean more towards wanting, like since you're pursuing an academic program, they do want people who can speak to your academic experience, different from a job in that way. But again, like what Ellen said, exactly what Ellen said, choose people who know you best. In terms of who to choose, so I knew that I wanted to choose 3 professors. And I tried to strategize people who knew me in different ways. Like I had my thesis advisor write, I had my academic advisor write, and then I had someone who had also supervised me in my work, like in my work as a researcher while I was working at school. When I was talking with them, what I would say is, talk with them early. As soon as you know that you want someone to be a letter of rec writer, you'd like to ask them if they're willing to do that. Ask them. I don't think you can ever be too early. Ellen and I were just talking about this. Like if you're a sophomore now and you're thinking, man, I really think at the end of my time here, I'm going to want to apply, start that conversation with an advisor and say, hey, this is something I'm thinking about, because then they and their brain, if they're going to be a letter writer for you, can start to take note of, okay, you crushed this project. I want to make sure I talk about this in your letter of rec. So ask early. I would say at a minimum, you want to ask people a month in advance if it's new, but earlier is always better. And Ellen can probably speak a little bit more to that.
I've had like people from the beginning of the summer said, in October, I'm going to need a law school letter of rec or whatever. And then I just have it on my calendar. I know it's coming. And then it's, up to me to find the time. I also always really appreciate and will ask, basically, I won't start my letter until you've sent me your application materials. So if applications are due September 1st, I don't think they are, but say they were, then you want to make sure you're done a draft of your materials at least a month before that. Just a draft. They don't have to be finalized, but me reading through that can get some idea of, what your interests are. And I can speak to those more specifically about the program in my letter. My letter will be way stronger if I have all that. And like, we might have a really great relationship and I know you really well, but I have a lot of students and I'm trying to remember, were you the one who did this thing or was that somebody else, so it helps, having your resume and your letter really helps me sort that out. And then I also ask students whether I know them well or not. If they ask me for a letter, I usually write back and say, is there anything in particular you asked me for a reason? What components of your application do you want me to speak to in particular? Is there something that you think I have particular insight that your other letter writers don't? So I'll ask people that, and even if I don't know them that well, that actually really helps me write a better targeted letter about what they want. So those are the professor side tips that I would say.
Yeah, just reiterating that, like, I would say once you have people who have agreed to write for you, get the materials to them, and then that will also help them see, okay, if you talked your whole personal statement about something, about one particular thing, they're going to highlight that and affirm that in your letter, but then they're probably going to talk about something different too, right? You want your letters to complement your personal statement, but not to be the exact same nor the exact different. So I think discussing with them and saying, hey, hey, Alan, I loved when we got to work together on COVID research. Could you maybe highlight that? I didn't get a lot of time to talk about that in my personal statement. Things like that will help you strategize with your letter writers and with your personal statement, how to kind of show who you are and make sure that you're basically tying the package together with a bow. Yeah,
that's great. Anything else you want to say about the application materials? I was going to move on to the SOPHAS tips for the SOPHAS system if you have any more, but I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think the tips are probably good.
Okay.
So SOPHAS, I don't know how to pronounce it. There are definitely like tips and tricks to figuring out it. So I will share what I have here, but also please feel free to reach out to me. Alan has my contact information and I'd be happy to talk through things with you or, help you figure out which button to click. These are the things that I could think of off the top of my head that I learned, whether by doing it by mistake or like some knowledge was passed down to me. The first thing is that, so transcript, I mentioned this before, you do submit a copy of your transcript. I'm pretty sure the school actually sends it to the school. So there's instructions on SOPHAS, but make sure you do that early on. I did that before I had my personal statement written. I did that before I even knew all the schools I was going to apply for. Get that transcript in because there can be delays that make it really frustrating if you're trying to apply at the very end and you have to still do that. So what you do is you upload the transcript, or no, you somehow send that official copy of your transcript to the school following the directions on the SOPHAS website. But then you also have to manually input every single class along with the grade that you got on that class. Basically what they do then is they verify them together and make sure that it matches. It's really frustrating. It's a little bit challenging to figure out how to enter in AP classes from high school if you took those, CIS classes if you took those, study abroad classes, again, can sometimes be a little bit frustrating. They have specific instructions for all of those things though. So I'm happy to show you what I did if you have questions, happy to connect. I also called SOPHAS a couple times and been just how do I enter this in? This is really frustrating. Again, I would say early on, get on it because the longer you wait, the more everybody else is going to have those questions and their phone lines get long. So do it early and it will decrease your stress in the long run. Let's see. For the resume, I mentioned this previously, you do upload a hard copy of your resume, but you also have to manually input all of those things. So all your work experiences. I put in I was in ETL, right? That wasn't a job, but I did put it in the work experience section. So know that you can kind of sort of interpret that with some flexibility because it's just work experience. It doesn't give you an option to put extracurriculars, etc. Check when you do it to make sure they didn't make changes, but that's how it was when I did it. The thing to note that I didn't know is that you do have the option to put in a references, name and contact information for every single thing you put in. So at the last minute, I didn't know this. I was reaching out to people from ETL and people from Global Health Affairs and so many advisors to try and figure out, hey, is it okay if I put your name and your email on here? Most likely they're going to say yes, but you do want to ask them beforehand. So just giving you a heads up that when you do put that manual entry in, it will ask you for a reference. It's optional, always advised if you can do it to put it in. So
can I ask you a clarification question about that? You're saying, a reference for every single thing on your resume, like who could corroborate this information kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep. So like, I think they're just wanting to make sure that you did it. I didn't have anybody reach out to me and say, oh, I was reached out by so-and-so, but like for ETL, I reached out to an old ETL advisor, and it was random. Like, I know I had someone from our doula project. I had to put their contact info down, and those are people who I hadn't ever asked for references before. It's just a good thing to know. So the last minute, you're not, reaching out to a million people trying to make sure that it's okay if you put their email down. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And did you get it? So you don't know that anybody was contacted, but did you read anywhere online, like how important is it to include that? Because it sounds like a lot of extra, like contacting a lot of
Yeah,
extra work.
I don't think I didn't hear from anyone that it was contacted, but it is the fact that it's optional, but it's there. It made me feel like it was because I was in good standing with these positions. I wanted to put a reference down, just because people might interpret it a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are certain situations when you don't want to put your reference's name down. But talk to Ellen about that. If that's the case, and she can help you figure out what to do. Let's see. The other thing is that for all of your materials, your personal statements, your resume, sometimes supplemental questions, you're uploading those things. So upload them as PDFs. I do know some people that upload them as Word documents, and the formatting got all messed up. So upload as PDFs. It's just a good standard. It's not going to mess with the formatting. If you have a social security number and you're comfortable putting it on your application, I would strongly encourage you to do so. I did not, because it wasn't required. And then I figured out after the fact that many of the schools needed that social security number to consider me for financial aid. So yeah, know that I went through the whole application, didn't even realize I hadn't filled it out, submitted my first application, and then I couldn't edit it. So your personal information, that's something to know too, is once you submit one application to one school, a lot of the application is locked. So you can't go back and edit things if you realize you made a mistake, or it's locked. So know that that is the case. For me, if you make the same mistake I did where you don't put it on there, I reached out to financial aid at every single school and eventually got it worked out, but it was just an extra hassle. And also getting your social security number, which is a secure piece of information. You don't just want to like email that, right? But we figured it out. So my advice to you would be, if you're comfortable putting on there, SOPHAS is secure. It says it's secure, at least, to put it on there. Okay. So submitting your application, this is the part that, again, it's kind of like this black hole of you don't know what's going to happen when you submit it. You'll notice on some of the schools' websites that they'll say, they'll warn you to submit your application in advance because it takes up to a couple weeks to be verified. So what I would say is submit your first application early. Like I think I submitted the U of M first, and I submitted that like a month before the deadline because I had no idea how long it was going to take for them to verify my application. They did verify it pretty quickly. I think it was about a week. But then every sort of secondary application after that, so if I applied to the U of M and then I was going to apply to University of Washington, that's a bad example because they don't use SOPHAS. They're the one school that doesn't. What's another school? Washington University in St. Louis. That application verified instantly because I had already had my University of Minnesota application verified. So know that once you get one in, you're pretty set. I would say check to be safe, like make sure you get two in and that it goes instantly to make sure, but then okay, I don't have to be stressed about it taking so long to verify. Let's see, I mentioned this already, but once you've submitted one application, most of your personal information is locked. So like you can't change your resume, you can't change, I think the one thing you can maybe change is your transcript a little bit because they want to have it be flexible for students who are maybe still in school at that time. But read all before you submit, read and know what's going to be locked and what's going to be editable, because that was one thing I didn't think about and it kind of bit me in the butt at the end. double check that your transcripts, your social security number, if you choose to do so, and if you have one, and languages. That was the other thing that I didn't put in there because it wasn't required. I missed putting it in. I wanted to write that I, knew some Spanish on my application, and there's a box to check that and a box to talk about that. Because it wasn't required, it didn't flag that I hadn't done it. So just recommending for all of you, if you do have some sort of language proficiency, to make sure you do that, and don't forget to do that, because it won't flag you if you, and then it locks. So I realized after I'd submitted my first one that I didn't talk about Spanish. And then I worked it out. I had to email every school and ask that they be so kind to basically add another page, an addendum to my application. But know that it's something to be aware of. Yeah, I think
So that sounds like
it's a mammoth. It's a
sucks.
mammoth,
Yeah.
but you figure it out. Make it.
But don't do it at the night before you have to turn it in, basically, is what I'm hearing. Start it way in advance. And you can start it and save all your progress on it.
Exactly. You can start it, and nothing is locked until you click submit. So submit the first time, and then you submit. Your personal statements will change. Yeah.
Cool. Very helpful. So let's talk about funding. How do you fund an MpH program? What are all the possibilities?
Yeah.
What are all the
Yeah, so there's many different ways to think about this. Some schools have great scholarships that are available, so I'd encourage you to apply, look at school websites, reach out to the contacts to get your name on the table, ask about application deadlines. Sometimes they fluctuate, and a lot of times the websites aren't up to date. So it never hurts to reach out, send an email, express your interest and your excitement in the school and in the scholarship, get on their radar.
When you say reach out, do you mean to the admissions for the public health school, or?
Usually there's a contact person listed. I mean, sometimes if it's an admissions scholarship, yes, admissions, but if it's a departmental scholarship and there's a program coordinator that's in charge of that scholarship, reach out to them. Usually you'll find a particular person. Yeah, scholarships are one way. The FAFSA is still a thing for graduate school. So fill out your FAFSA for financial aid. And there are many different types of loans for graduate school, but know that loans is a very real way and very common way that many people are paying for school. There are also fellowships that exist. Again, look on school's website for these, because there's oftentimes school-wide scholarships, and there's also departmental or program-specific scholarships. So you want to make sure that you're aware of all those and know the deadlines, and are reaching out to those people to make sure you're considered and getting those application materials in. The last thing that I would say is employment through the school, whether that's as a graduate assistant, research assistant, teaching assistant. That's another great way to pay for school. The U of M is very unique in that they have a tuition benefit component to that. So if you work as a research assistant, a TA, you can get some funding for that. Yeah, but if you're interested in those at the University of Minnesota, reach out early, get on professor's radar early. Oftentimes those positions aren't posted, and you have to build a relationship with a professor before you realize that there might be positions available. Yeah.
Cool. And then I know, if your parents or grandparents or something started a 529 or an education savings account for you, and you didn't use it all in undergrad, if you're one of the lucky few who didn't, then you can use that for grad school as well. So that's not just for undergrad.
Yes.
Cool. Well, the last thing I wanted to ask you about was, because I know this is something that you do particularly well, and you've hinted at it a little bit over the course of this conversation, but you're trying to find a research assistantship. You want to make some connections that, I don't know, just might help you figure out what you want to do. What networking tips or advice do you have for students thinking about applying to MpH programs?
Yeah. So I would say contact people. The best way is to, I think, send emails and try and get a meeting with someone. So whether that's virtual or meeting in person, show up to admitted students days if you get accepted into programs. That's a great day to do networking. But what I did is I contacted the program directors and or program coordinators via email, sent them an email, told them who I was, told them I was really excited about the school, show them I was motivated. I think that a really good piece of advice that I realized is like, you don't know you're going to go to school. So you want to show every school that they could be the one, right? You want to show every school that you're really excited and you see yourself being a successful student there. So be really enthusiastic and show commitment. Ask them about the program. And then I think the goal of those meetings is always to get another meeting sort of after that. So sort of share, once you've had the conversation, ask at the end if they might be willing to connect you with others in your research area or maybe other students. Talking to current students was a huge, huge resource for me. Learning about, what does the program look like for you? How are you doing? Do you feel supported by the institution? Yeah. Other thoughts on that, Ellen?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I know you visited a bunch of the schools that you got accepted to, right?
Yep.
Or it was after you got accepted that you visited them?
After I got accepted.
Yeah, okay. So were those admitted student days, like, or if not, what did you do while you were out there, and how important was visiting the schools to helping you make your decision?
Super important. It was super, super important. I would say gave me a very clear, very quick idea of what going to that school would look like. Particularly for schools, like I toured some schools in New York City and Boston, and I had no idea what being in New York City or Boston would be like. And I think it's super, super hard to get a sense for what that school is like without going there because it was so different for me. It is expensive though. So it's expensive to go and see schools. So if it's something that you might not be able to afford, know that like some schools have scholarships for that. Also, they have virtual admitted students days. I did that for several schools as well. I chose my favorites and visited those. And then I did virtual admitted students days for the others. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's it. Anything I missed that you want to address, or we pretty much covered?
Yeah, we covered a lot of info.
Yeah, yeah.
It's exciting. I think I would just say like, kudos to you for doing this. It's amazing. And know that you've got a support system of people helping you out. I'm happy to answer questions or read personal statements or any questions. So feel free to reach out. Ellen's an awesome resource too, and read every single thing that I submitted. So
True.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for spending the time with me today, Grace. I hope you have a great start of the school year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye,
Talk to you later.
everyone.
Bye.